What's up, everybody? It's your boy Kinky again. Today we're going to be talking about World of Warcraft again. With Legion coming down to its final days and with Battle for Azeroth and its development stages, I thought it would be a good chance to reflect and rank the previous WoW expansions and my personal favorites from worst to first. Hope you guys enjoy. So before we start this video, I just want to point out that this is my own personal opinion. You may have different thoughts. This is my list. It could be completely different from person to person. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments. Let me know what your worst expansion was, what your favorite expansion was. Have you played all of them? Have you not? When did you start? Let's talk about that. So let's just get right down to it. The very worst expansion in my mind was Warlords of Draenor. There was a lot of good things about this expansion when you actually sit down and think of it. They had the scaling for raids, they had the new character models, they had account-wide heirlooms, toys, and tabards. They had the new crafting system for where you could craft items directly out of your bank. They increased the stack size. The quest items were no longer in your bags. Reforging was removed. And the leveling experience overall was actually really good. But the cons were pretty bad for this expansion. I mean, garrisons, those were a piece of crap. Nobody liked garrisons. If you like garrisons, you're stupid. The last raids here for Warlords of Draenor also lasted a really long time, and knowing what Legion is now, that makes sense, but it still was 14 months of the same content. It got dry. The last bad thing about Warlords of Draenor was its story. It was good to see all the heroes that we knew and grew to love in the Warcraft franchise before we got WoW, but with the time travel and the different dimensions and everything like that, it got just messy and confusing. If Blizzard could have done a better job with that. So next up on my list from worst to first would be Cataclysm. Now, Cataclysm was when I took my first official break from WoW, so that should tell you something. Until Cataclysm came out, I did not have a single day where my sub actually lapsed for World of Warcraft. That being said, Cataclysm did have a lot of pros to it. They redid all the questing zones from 1 to 60 in Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. That's a pro for some people. From some others who want that classic experience, it bothered them. They added reforging, which at the time was really cool. They added archaeology. They had the guild advancement system, which was amazing. I really liked that. I didn't really like the have group will travel feature that it had, but everything else about it I thought was really, really cool. They also had worgens and goblins, and they also added a stat called mastery. Yeah, that wasn't always in the game. Some of the bad things about that expansion, though, they remade Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms. Like, again, I said, that could be a pro or a con. They also added justice and valor points. Unlike the honor and conquest points, I didn't like this. I like going into a dungeon or a raid and killing a boss and getting the loot off of him and feeling like I earned it. When I'm farming points like justice and valor and then going and exchanging it for a piece of gear, I don't feel like I really earned it. Cataclysm also added LFR, which was, I understand Blizzard wanting to show people the end raids and they want to show the story off, but they could have found a better way than LFR. LFR is a nightmare in my mind. I hate it. Moving right along, next on my list from worst to first was Mists of Pandaria. Now, I had a very hard time figuring out where to put this one because the more I thought about this expansion, the more I realized it was actually a really good expansion. Specifically because it had a very unique aesthetic compared to every other expansion that we've had come through World of Warcraft. And it just, the Jade Forest, the whole feel of Mists of Pandaria was completely different than any other expansion, I felt like. We also got pandas, which at first I did not care for, but they've grown on me. I don't dislike them anymore, but I'm not going to go out of my way to play one. We also got the addition of monks. If you haven't played monks in Legion, do yourself a favor and go play some monk. Windwalker is fucking awesome. It's one of the most fun specs to play in the game. I didn't end up maining it because I had a really close friend who mained it, so I played around that. But monks are a lot of fun to play. Mists of Pandaria also had really strong raids. Throne of Thunder, Siege of Orgrimmar, Both of those were really good raids. Mists of Pandaria had a really good PvE scene. They also added the cross-realm servers in Mists of Pandaria and scenarios. Blizzard also added the challenge mode dungeons and the pet combat system, which is essentially Pokemon but in World of Warcraft, which I do enjoy. I don't do it a lot, but I do enjoy it. They also didn't allow flying until max level, which compared to previous expansions, I thought was at least a step in the right direction. Cons for this expansion were they removed the talent tree, and there were no dungeons released after the initial release of the expansion. I've always really enjoyed it when Blizzards introduce new dungeons as we progress through the story of the expansion, and just for some reason in Mists of Pandaria we didn't get that. I think the biggest con for me in Mists of Pandaria was the legendary cloak. I really did not like everybody having the same legendary. It took away that special feeling that you had this legendary, and when you used to see somebody with a legendary, it used to actually mean something. In Mists of Pandaria, it was, do you have the legendary cloak? No? Well, you can't go raid then. It was more of just a gear check at that point, and people were requiring it when legendaries used to be a bonus. It used to not be what you had to have for a base to go and do something. So now we're to the top 3. If you've been playing WoW or you've been following along, you probably figure out what these last 3 are. Number 3 for me is Legion. Legion did a lot of good things. It is by far the best expansion since Wrath of the Lich King. It's been a really good expansion. It's brought a lot of people back. It also brought one of my favorite lore characters, Illidan, back. The character progression has been phenomenal. There's been some times when it's been a bit much with the AP grind and stuff like that, but it has good character progression, good lore, the class hall system was great. The raids are really good raids. We got the Demon Hunter, we got a professions overhaul. Not really an overhaul, kind of like ranks in your progression, in your professions. And then you also get quests that go along with your professions more so than we used to have. The PvP talent system was added. We got a class redesign for every single class in the game, which was phenomenal. I didn't like the pruning that they did to all the classes, but in general, the feel of every class is amazing. Every class has their own specific thing that they're good at. They all feel unique and different, and Blizzard did a really great job with that. And the last thing for a pro to Legion, which is probably the biggest pro for me, is the Mythic Plus dungeon system. That system is so much fun. I love having the random affixes every week, and it just changes every week, and you could have one week a plus 13 is super easy, and then the next week it's next to impossible to do. Some of the cons for Legion, though, there were quite a bit of cons, but I felt like the pros were so strong that it still came in front of every other expansion that I've listed so far. The first con would definitely be the RNG legendaries. I hated having the RNG legendaries. Some specs were so reliant on a specific legendary that it made it not fun to play that class until you got that legendary, because you just felt like you were falling behind everybody until you got that legendary. Another con was just that there was so much to do, and content was being released so rapidly that guilds got burnt out. I mean, there wasn't, normally you would progress through your raids here, then you'd have a month or 2 off to recuperate, to, relax, go do your alt runs and all that kind of stuff. And this, nope, finish Emerald Nightmare, move on to the next one. It was, let's go, come on, let's go, let's keep going, come on, let's go. There was a lot of content in this expansion, which is a good thing. I don't want them to have less content. I'm just saying that it burned out a lot of guilds, including my guild. Another con for me was definitely the artifacts. I love the artifact progression, but the weapons that they chose I did not like. I didn't like the fact that every single Retribution Paladin had an Ashbringer. It made the Ashbringer not feel like that amazing, super powerful, legendary weapon that you used to hear about like in stories and stuff. It just made it not feel special anymore. I love the progression system that were associated with the artifacts, just the artifacts that they chose, I feel like they could have done that in a much better way. The last thing that was a big con for me in this past expansion of Legion was the Titan Forging. I hate Titan Forging. Just fucking get rid of it. I do not like it at all. I'm okay with stuff going up like 10, 15 item levels, but when I'm on the 3rd tier of the expansion and I'm going back and running the 1st tier to try and get an item to hope it Titan Forges and gets plus 40 item levels, so that way it's better than any trinket I can get in the current raid tier, that's bullshit. That should not be in the game. That's bullshit. Take it out, please. Now, the last 2 expansions, I had a really hard time coming up with what I thought was number 1 and number 2. The order that I'm going to say it's in for me is not the order that I thought it was going to be, and I thought it was going to be the other way around. But number 2 for me is Burning Crusade. I thought this was going to be number 1, and every time that I sit there and somebody asks me your favorite expansion, without hesitation I would say Burning Crusade. But after I sat down and thought about it, it's number 2. And there's one big reason why, and I'll get to that. First, I'll tell you the things I liked about it. We got the Blood Elves and we got the Draenei. Great. We got Paladins and Shamans for the opposing factions. Great. We got Heroic Dungeons. Like I said, I love the Mythic Plus dungeons. It should be no surprise that I was a huge fan of when they introduced Heroic Dungeons, considering I played through Classic. Jewel crafting was added. That was awesome. We got arenas. Even better. Awesome. Attunements were still in the game. I loved having attunements in Classic. Getting attuned for Molten Core and BWL was some memorable time for me when I was progressing through Classic. It felt like I actually deserved to be in that raid, not I just hit I and go to LFR and queue for something. It actually felt special to be able to go to a raid. There was also Karazhan and Black Temple, 2 of my favorite raids. I know that by now they're outdated and they're not a great raid to go and do, and the mechanics aren't necessarily challenging anymore, but looking back, those are 2 of the most memorable raids that I ever did. World PvP was still a thing back then. We had Hellfire Peninsula. Everybody remember those 3 little towers swapping back and forth between red and blue all day? Yeah, that was awesome. We also had a real talent system in Burning Crusade where you could actually be a hybrid class. I remember trying out multiple specs with my hunter with survival and beast mastery, trying to get the most HP and most sustainability that I could have when I was PvPing with that. It was awesome. I loved having an actual talent system. I wish we still had that today. The biggest con for me for Burning Crusade was the flying mounts. At first when I heard about it, I was ecstatic. I thought it was going to be awesome. But when we actually got to it and I realized how much time we spent on our flying mounts instead of walking around the world, and how many less people we ran into because of that, I started to dislike it. And now I hate it even more. I wish we didn't have flying at all. Yet I'm at the point where it's like, oh, I need flying now. Can I please have flying? But that's because I've gotten used to it. When I look back on previous expansions, specifically Burning Crusade, and before that in Classic, running around from point A to point B had some of the most iconic memories for me in World of Warcraft. That's where you would get that open world PvP. You don't get that now when you're flying around. You don't get it nearly as much as you would in Classic. It was just flying mounts ruined a lot of the game. For me. Maybe not for you, but flying mounts ruined a lot for me. And if you couldn't guess it by now, the number 1 expansion in my books, and I know that people probably say, oh, you're only saying that because you're a Classic player and you played through everything and you're just a fanboy, rose-colored glasses and everything. But my favorite expansion was Wrath of the Lich King. Here's why Wrath of the Lich King was my absolute favorite expansion. And like I said, it was hard for me to pick between Burning Crusade and this one. The lore in Wrath of the Lich King was phenomenal. I didn't play any of the Warcraft games prior to World of Warcraft. I went back and played them a little bit, I didn't beat all of them, but I did play them a little bit after I had started playing World of Warcraft, but that's just because I wanted to get the story of what the hell was going on. But in Wrath of the Lich King, it felt like everything you were doing was actually pointing towards a single goal of taking down the Lich King. There hasn't been another expansion where it's really felt like that. Death Knights were also released in Wrath of the Lich King. I really like Death Knights. I made one for a while in Legion, so Death Knights are awesome. They re-released Naxxramas in Wrath of the Lich King, and Naxxramas was the only raid I did not get to do in Classic. My guild was doing it, but I didn't have the time to farm up the required rep/items that you would need to unlock it. So I was excited to go and see Naxxramas finally. We also had Wintergrasp in Wrath of the Lich King, which was really cool. It had a raid associated to it, and it was really cool. I wish they would keep doing things like Wintergrasp. I thought Wintergrasp was a lot of fun. Going back to raids, we also had Ulduar and Icecrown Citadel. Ulduar is one of the best raids that Blizzard has ever done. If you have not done it, go do it now, and then come back here, and then listen to the rest of my bullshit. Ulduar is one of the best raids that they've done. Icecrown Citadel, I mean, like I was saying before, we finally got the ending to 2 years worth of storytelling. Cutscenes were finally introduced in the questing in Wrath of the Lich King, which was phenomenal. Most people have heard about the Wrathgate. If you haven't heard it or seen it, go watch that now. There's a lot of things in Wrath of the Lich King that are just huge iconic moments. Wrath of the Lich King was also when we got our first post-initial launch max level dungeons. They also released Inscription in Wrath of the Lich King. They had a more real talent system. It wasn't quite as good as what Burning Crusade had, but it still felt like an actual talent system. People are gonna always come say that, oh, people just use cookie cutter builds, which yes, to an extent is true, but a lot of those cookie cutter builds had 5 flex points, or they'd have 7 or 8 flex points where you could go and you could put them here, you could put them here, you could put them here. And that, even just that little bit, made it feel like you were building your own character instead of just clicking on, okay, I'm a Retribution Paladin, or okay, I'm a combat rogue, or I guess it's not combat anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. But those type of things, like it didn't feel like you were just, okay, I'm clicking one button and all the choices are made for me. I have less choices now. I liked having choices. The last cool thing that I liked from Wrath of the Lich King was the legendary quest line. Now, I know I said I didn't like the legendary cloak from Mists, but that was a much different type of quest line than the legendary weapon quest line in Wrath of the Lich King and ICC. The one downfall of Wrath of the Lich King that I had was they introduced the Dungeon Finder in Wrath of the Lich King. And I like the flying. I feel like the Dungeon Finder was another big, oops, there goes the community type situation. You don't have people talking, interacting with each other as much to form those groups, and then once you've had that interaction, you continue to talk. Now with Dungeon Finder, you get in a group, nobody says anything, you run the dungeon, and you're done. At the beginning of expansions, you have some back and forth about mechanics and stuff, but once the expansion's 3-4 weeks old, nobody talks about anything anymore. They just want to get in, get their shit, and get out. Before you had the Dungeon Finder, you had a lot more back and forth in parties just because people were talking before they even got to the instance. I know that it's dumb, and a lot of people like the fact that I can just queue for whatever I want, whenever I want, and Blizzard will just automatically match me with people. And for some people that's great, but it really took a big hit on the community. So that's it. Those are my personal preferences for World of Warcraft expansions from worst to first. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me or not? Sound off in the comments below. I'll read everything I can. I'll respond to all you guys. And as always, guys, take care. Peace.
Hey, it's Radit here. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. We put out multiple new videos each week, and we appreciate all of your support. Thanks for watching, everyone, and cheers.